Alright, looks like we're online. Just gonna type something into the chat to make sure everything's good. So today's topic, is my mic? Okay, it looks like my mic's working. Still getting used to all these buttons and sliders. Good old user interfaces. Cool. So today's stream is titled Internet Subcultures, Industrial Programming, and More. What is today's stream going to be about? Today I'm going to look at this connection between technology and how people will come to group themselves, mostly on the internet, with not necessarily around these technologies, but specific groupings will come up which would probably only exist because of these technologies. So I think in general, I'll just talk about a couple of these things, show a couple things that people have sent in and stuff that I've been looking at. And then I'll continue a little bit on the Jacques Ellul book if I exhaust the content I have, because I didn't have too much to bring up today. So with that being said, let's get started. So one person sent in this article, An Oral History of Bank Python. Now, as I understand, probably at least half the people that have viewed my stream have some exposure to programming or programming languages of some kind. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of the Python programming language, which I'll bring up. So the Python programming language is a popular programming language, especially for non-programming specialists. So I'll elaborate on what that means. Back in the day, in order to program computers using languages like the C programming language, you would have to understand a lot of stuff about computers and how computers work. So this language they'll call so for example, let me rewind. So programming languages, low level, high level. Get an arrow. So roughly when we're talking about programming languages, we could talk about how close to the machine you are. So what does that mean? A very low-level language, what you describe as low-level, means that the stuff you type, the operations that you're programming, will be quite close to operations that are actually having on the hardware. So let me actually bring out a cool thing to show you all. So this is it's like a Chinese abacus, right? So a lot of people they'll look at something like this and say it's actually one of the first digital computers, because when you slide these beads, then you could say that the state of this machine represents some different value. And then if you know how to move them in a certain way, then suddenly you could conduct calculations, not just represent numbers. So I don't know how well this shows on the camera. I'm sure you could find ample examples online explaining this if you wanted to know how abacus works. So I'm not going to worry about the graphics too much here, but just as one thing, so if I slide one bead, that's 1. If I slide a bead on the next column over, then that would be 10. So 10 plus 1 is 11. Now the state that's represented on here is 11. If I wanted to add 20, I'd go to the tens place. I could just slide over 2 beads. So what's 11 plus 20? Then now the state of the machine is 31. So how does this relate to low-level versus high-level programming? Well, on here, it's not a very sophisticated computer, all things considered. But here you would be saying, I'm doing some really, really low-level programming because I'm literally manipulating the hardware of this very simple computer with my hands. If you indeed accept this to be a computer. I'm not going to get into Turing machines and all that nerd stuff. I'll add a note in case someone wants to talk about that. Turing completeness, Turing machines, that sort of stuff. Oh, hello, hey, hello. Welcome to the chat. Okay, I'm going to put this back really quick. So, was pulling out the abacus to show you're directly manipulating the hardware, so that would be a very low-level programming language. Probably the lowest level stuff you would actually fiddle around with, perhaps, would be an assembly language. And if you look at what's happening, you're actually manually manipulating bits and doing operations that don't look like if you don't know computer stuff, it's not obvious what's happening. Now, we looked through the history of computer languages. A language that might even sound ancient still today would be a language like Fortran. And Fortran, I think the name means something like formula translation. Yeah, so the name Fortran is derived from formula translating system. So as opposed to talking about bits and bytes shifting and all that, then Fortran emerged as a higher level language because you were supposed to be able to read it more like how people would be, engineers and people especially, would be used to reading formulas and stuff that they might input to calculate something. So even here, like the area of a triangle, you have a variable named like area. This is probably like some square root function. You still have to deal with what you'll call a data type in a programming language. So for example, there would be integers like 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then there's what's called like a floating point number, which is going to be basically a number with a decimal followed by some more digits. So whereas an integer is precise, this is like you have discrete 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. How many numbers are between 1 and 2? Well, if you start counting how many divisions you could do, like just mathematically, it's infinite. But a computer is a machine, so there will be limitations on the degrees of precision you could represent between those. So programming languages, you would still see what would be considered like lower level, in the sense that you only have to think about stuff like floats because you're using a computer. If you weren't using a computer, you wouldn't have to think about floats at all. For example, like one obvious example is if I write something like 1/3 is equal to 0.33333, the 0.33333 stuff, this is only there because I'm limited by the nature of the representational system I'm using with the computer. If I could, I'll pull out some advanced software. Let me get up Microsoft Paint, right? And show you something cool. How Microsoft Paint is more advanced than your favorite programming language. So if I pull up Microsoft Paint, do I have to? Oh no, it's showing. Okay, it just took a second. So in Microsoft Paint, if I go 1/3, then we see how Microsoft Paint is actually far more advanced at being able to represent this 0.333333 stuff, then, for example, if I had to store a number as a floating point, because this is just a human, it's for humans to read, not for computers to read. Cool. Okay, we have a comment by Hello. It says, if you look up the first computer, you usually get Babbage's machine. I was never sure what to make of that, as it doesn't resemble any modern conception of a computer. What's your take? Yeah, so for all this stuff, we could just pull up an example of this computer. People will come up with a formal idea for what constitutes a computer. And then when you're talking about, what was the first computer, then it'll be whatever adheres to someone's definition. So I called like an abacus a computer, but then, somebody might come up with some reason based on their definition of a computer that, like, technically the abacus would count as a computer. So it looks like some dials. Yeah, I'll have to look more into this. I actually haven't really looked into Babbage and his computers specifically. But even just from seeing this, like, a couple of key features you could see is you have dials that have numbers. So you know that there's going to be something about the physical form of the object with the dials. It's going to be able to represent some kind of state. And then there's rules that govern how you move from one state to another. So in the abacus, it's really easy to see how, the states will correspond to numbers we're familiar with, like 2 or 10 or 20 or whatever. Whereas if we were talking about what is the state of this machine, then it's a lot harder to describe that without just showing the machine itself. Anyways, let's get back to Python, which is to say, okay, one of the goals with programming languages as they've developed is they wanted to be able to have higher and higher levels of abstraction. So how is it that you could design a programming language so you don't have to think about the specific computer or this specific machine that you're working on? Like, I don't have to think, oh yeah, I'm using a Intel whatever processor with such and such type of RAM. How could it be that people don't think about stuff like this, but instead they're just able to program and express the calculations that they want to do, or not even calculations, you could say express the operations that they want to do. For instance, I want it so when a user types go, it makes a car go, or something like that. Whatever it is that you're talking about. High-level languages are designed to be much more easily readable, writable, and you want it so that people do not even think about the machine that they're using. That's a goal of these things. So this language, Python, it became very popular. Like, I'll just Google and search something. Like, if I search the term Python data science, I'm probably going to get millions of hits. So we could look at what it says. Yeah, so they say 444 million results. So that's a lot of results when I search Python data science. Whereas, like, let's search another programming language. Let's say I search, Java data science. 280 million. So the Python data science has, hundreds of millions more results than the Java data science. So Python became very popular in trying to get people with traditionally non-computer science fields using computational tools. So if you search Python packages or Python software for all sorts of applications, like if I search Python finance library, I'm going to find all sorts of stuff. Okay, Hello says he has a linguistics question for me. If you could post a question, I'll be happy to answer it. Okay, and another comment by Hello. He says the KNR book. So this is a classic of programming. This book is so well known, people will just refer to it as KNR, after the authors Kernighan and Ritchie. And C, which now we think, oh, C, that's kind of a hard programming language that has a lot of computer hardware type low-level operations. We kind of think of it as relatively low-level, because compared to a language like Python, it's relatively low-level. But compared to, like, we looked at assembly language, you would say that C is a relatively high-level language compared to assembly. Or, I don't know what's below assembly, but whatever. It's a relatively high-level language. So we're going relative here. Anyways, Python would be kind of the modern high-level language that won so far for bringing a lot of non-computer specialists to using computer data science applications. All right, let's go to Hello's linguistics question. Okay, he says, I can't find the article, but it said that the if-then pairing only exists in English as a logical construct. It simply doesn't exist in any other language that people speak widely. So there is an argument that encoding formal logic in this way, imperative programming, is entirely because programming is done in English. Is this actually true based on your knowledge of natural languages? Okay, this is an interesting topic. I'll add it here, and I'll just phrase this as the relationship between human languages and programming ones. I'm just saving room on this line. Oh no, relationship. Okay, let's use an abbreviation. Between human languages and programming ones. All right. Illustrative example here. So the whole reason I made abbreviations and stuff here was because of a constraint put on by the technology. I wanted it to stay in the window. So I changed the language, the way I express the human language, in order to bend it to the technology. Very relevant. So what is the relevance between this? I remember, so I was actually in graduate school doing linguistics, and I heard some educator people bring up some idea like, oh, why can't we teach programming languages instead of foreign languages like Spanish or French or something like that? So at the time I was like, oh, that's not good because you have to learn natural languages to understand other peoples and cultures and stuff like that. Now, I think that when you do learn like a programming language, think of it more like this. Learning to code, let's put quotes around that, means learning a new system. Namely, how do people develop programs on computers? So there's going to be all sorts of stuff that you do and that you say through typing and writing code that you wouldn't do if you weren't writing code, basically. So one problem like I faced myself when I was trying to get better and learn programming was at the beginning I was pretty good because if I just opened a textbook and I did all the exercises, then I would be able to improve and know how the syntax and the grammar and stuff of the language worked. But then I ran into a problem, which is, all right, I kind of know all the basics of how this programming language works, and I could solve like little problems that people will post on the internet or something. But then a problem I faced was, okay, well, now what do? There's actually nothing I want my computer to do that there isn't already a program out there that already does it. I'll give you an example of these sort of programming problems. So like if I just search programming problems Python, a lot of results are going to come up for so-called interview questions. And these will be quite well-defined exercises and things that you could do in order to prove that you could write Python code in a certain way. Okay, so this is supposed to be a pretty easy exercise. Let's see what it says. Alright, it says, ask the user for a number. Depending on whether the number is even or odd, print out an appropriate message to the user. Okay, so to do a task like this, then you would have to know, okay, so how do I get user input? And then different languages will have different mechanics to do this. And then, how do you write like a conditional statement to determine if it's even or odd? And then how do you do output? So to complete a program like this successfully, you would have to know how to do all those operations. Now, we could think of language in a different way. When you're studying a language, you're not doing things like evaluating whether or not numbers are even or odd. Like, these are things that you could ask a computer to do and evaluate, but it wouldn't be typical with human communication to do that sort of thing. Rather, with the human language, you're going to be asking questions. For example, how do I request something? Like, how do I order food at a restaurant? So on my desk, I got some relevant things I could show you. So here we had these ideas of programming language problems. And then like here, one language I'm studying now is Russian. So I have like a Russian phrase book here. Okay. Now these phrase books are really handy because they will be topically organized. So if you want to know how to do something, then you're going to have a section that is topically named. So I was looking at a section called meeting people. And what sort of stuff will be in this section? Well, it'll be like things that you do when you meet people. So the key phrases, right? My name is. And in Russian, Меня зовут Alan, right? I'd say, I think literally it's something like, to me, they call Alan, right? And then I work in Yaiz, California, whatever. So, don't test my Russian now. Not so good. But the point is that in like something like a phrase book, this will be the sort of all the practical basic operations, so to speak, that you would need to use to actually communicate in the language. Now, if you're not just communicating in a language, but you want to go deeper, you want to interpret literature, whatever it is that you want to do, then what you would probably have to do is you would have to go into a more formal, thorough study of the grammar. Programming languages, you could kind of look at equivalently. So I'll pull up something like the Python standard library or the Python documentations. I think in the chat we have some people that don't like the Python documentation very much, so please excuse the Python documentation if it's a bad example. Okay, anyway, so looking at the Python documentation, it's say, how does one learn Python? So if you search at the documentation, here, this tutorial, they say start here. You click on the tutorial, and the tutorial, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, now I can see why people don't like the Python docs, because how hard is it to even just get started? Okay, here, finally. Finally. We could even do some Python. We could do all sorts of stuff. Okay. Python. So they show you like this interactive prompt, and then they'll show you how to do all this stuff that would be operations you might do with the computer. Now, a lot of times the examples that they show are actually quite contrived in a way. So here okay, this is fun. They have us make a variable called the world is flat equals true. Now, YouTube fact checkers out there, this is all, I'm just giving an example from the official Python documentation. Please do not flag my video or say I'm spreading tinfoil hat thinking. We're just looking at the Python documentation. I'm not trying to do anything at all. Okay, so we made a variable called the world is flat, and we set the value if that's true. And then it shows you how to make like a little conditional statement here. So if, and then the name of the variable, and if when the statement is evaluated, if it is true, then we'll do this operation. Be careful not to crash into the ice wall. Okay, and then what do you think will happen when I press enter? So people, even if you don't have programming experience, the Python's pretty reasonable. What will probably happen is it will print the message, and that is indeed what happens. So the point of all this is to show with the programming language versus a natural language, the sort of stuff that's covered in the documentation and what it means to learn that thing is to actually learn how it is used in practice. So when you're talking with people, you're going to have to do operations like meeting people or ordering food or saying that something is not something, stuff like that. Whereas the sort of stuff that you would do in programming, you would not know this stuff at all unless you did some computer programming. So I was going to go, the Python standard library. One way to sort of look at what is it that a computer programming language is able to do. Well, I could look at the standard library, and then you could see what you're able to do in that language. So, for example, people do math in Python. So then you'll have all these modules or programming libraries, whatever you want to call them, that are associated with math. So you'll have stuff to deal with fractions. You could generate random numbers. You could do complex numbers, so that's like imaginary numbers. So now you know, okay, I know that if I use Python, then I readily available have all these tools in case I want to use these things. Got some big words like data persistence. So how is it I just opened up a Python window and I type stuff, but then you could say, how is it that I am able to save the results I did? I pretend I'm using Python like a fancy calculator doing all these calculations. Well, then what tools do I have available to save the work that I'm doing? Besides like writing a program and just you write out the whole program. If you're using Python interactively, especially, how would you save data? Various stuff about how to write different files to the computer. Cryptographic stuff, so making secret messages and things that other people can't read. So let's get back to Hello's question because I'm talking too much on this. Right, so the question was, is it kind of an English language bias that programming languages have particular structures? So specifically, we're looking at how a lot of programming language is like, if something is true, do something, or we could say then do something, else if something else is true, right, then do something else, this sort of thing. So programming languages, they'll all have some kind of mechanism to do stuff of this type of character. So is it a feature that a lot of programming languages, they use English keywords like if and else? These things are called keywords because they're a feature of the language that determines how other stuff is evaluated. They're like function words, grammar words, so to speak, of a programming language. Is this a function of English? My basic thought on this is that it is not that way. Rather, you have to learn a whole new system, even if you already speak English. Like English speaking people aren't born knowing how to use and operate computers with programming languages. Instead, we learn specific senses of all sorts of words. A famous example of this, for example, is the word or. So a lot of languages will use or But or in English is actually kind of ambiguous. We would say that there's inclusive or exclusive or. So if I said to you, would you like pizza or quiche for lunch? Do you want pizza or quiche for lunch? This would generally be an exclusive sense, because if you say I want pizza for lunch, then I'm not going to say bring you a quiche also, and then say, you said pizza or quiche, and I gave you both of them, and I answered your request because indeed I got you pizza. That evaluated to true, and quiche evaluated to true. If you did that, you would confuse people. So oftentimes when we're just speaking English, we mean in this exclusive way. Whereas in a programming language, if you wrote something like if true or 1 equals 1, then like both of these things will evaluate to true in this parentheses here. But we're not relying on an exclusive or. So the stuff here would still be evaluated. That's just how these things work. Okay, let's look at what Super had to say here. Might have been if else instead of if then. I can't remember. Yeah, the point I think still holds the general stuff that I'm saying here, which is that no matter what language you come from, when you're learning how to do programming stuff, you're learning specialized technical senses of all the keywords and stuff that are different from the normal language stuff like in English. For example, if I ask you like what is an object in English, right? Then you would be like a thing, like what do you mean what is an object? It's kind of whatever. But then even within different programming languages, like if you look between C++ or Ruby or even like JavaScript, whatever, the sense of the word object is different. And it is different because object is a technical term defined in a specific way for each of these, for each different language that uses objects. So in the same way too, like English or whatever, it's all the same. So when people, occasionally I'll hear comments like, oh yeah, like what if we made programming more inclusive? What if we had Chinese keywords or something for a language? Then in my opinion, it's basically, it doesn't matter, because when you learn to program, you're going to have to learn new technical senses for these words anyways, and you're not going to get confused speaking English because you program in C++, unless you're the biggest nerd in the world. But if you're not the biggest nerd in the world, and there could only be one biggest nerd in the world, this is logic, then I don't think that you're going to have a problem at all with that. So I hope that answers that question. Let's look what else you'll have to say. So Reaper says, how do you like using a line editor from 1976 as your note-taking application for your live stream? Actually, I'm using NeoVim. NeoVim is a reboot of a 1970s or whatever thing. But, look, they have a story that's coming out in July of this year. So I'm using a modern editor, although it's it may look like it has a primitive interface. Cool. All right. Hello says, this contradicts the other. So we're talking about language versus programming languages some more. Hello says, this contradicts the other conception that programming languages encode mathematics or formal logic, which are a more universal language. And he says, thanks for the explanation on this. Yeah, so here's the basic thing. When you're learning to program, it's basically like, how does a person communicate with a computer? Whereas natural language is like, how do people communicate with other people? And then, of course, like I mentioned that currently, right now, I've been going to Orthodox Church. So in Orthodox Church, there's what they call like a liturgical language. So a lot of people in America, they wouldn't know what a liturgical language is because you just speak the English everywhere. But yeah, so when I search this, like for example, there's mentions of like Roman Catholics and stuff. A lot of places for a long time they would have what's called liturgical language, which is language usage that's different from just me talking to you like here on the stream. So I don't know how to say, you know, hey, what's up? How are you doing? In Church Slavonic, which the Russian church uses. But I would be able to say other things in Church Slavonic that would be relevant to stuff that you would do in church, right? It wouldn't be relevant to just having a pint of beer with you and cracking jokes, right? It would be a different sort of stuff that you would say, for example, to pray and to ask God for something. Then you would use a liturgical language in which you could make that sort of talk in the same way. Now, I'm not saying like SQL queries are a liturgical language, but you could look at it this way: like, SQL is a specific language which you're going to use to make queries to a database, right? So, what is SQL good for? SQL is good for getting specific data from like tables that are stored in a database. So you're a store, you have tables of like a table of all the different customers and their phone numbers, and then a table with like all the different orders from the past day or whatever. Then SQL is very good at a specific thing. You could type with a very compact, meaningful, concise syntax or language in order to do a specific sort of operation. But can you say prayers in SQL? Can you I don't know, write a video game in SQL? I'm not going to say that you can't because I don't know for sure, but I would say there's probably other languages or ways that would be better for doing these things rather than SQL. Yeah, so let's just rewind all the way, which is to say, when we look at different programming language and even different natural languages, you could look at how we have I don't want to say formulaic, maybe standardized or accepted forms, which would be a language in which we're able to conduct various operations. So in my opinion, all programming, what I mean when I say like programming or coding or something, it means being able to get to a computer to follow like some kind of language in order to do various operations. So if you just know the basic syntax of the language, that's not good enough. It's just like if you know how to make sentences in English, does that mean that you could like say interesting things or ask people to do things? Like you theoretically you have the ability to, but you're going to need to understand the systems and have other people to interact with and all of this. Otherwise, your knowledge will just kind of be sitting there. In order to make it active or to use it, to be a programmer, you have to ask computers to do stuff, and to like speak a foreign language, you actually have to practice and use the language. You might do more like reading than speaking or something. Like for a bunch of languages I've studied, I actually pretty much never speak them, but I could read them all right because my experience with that language would be primarily like, interpreting an article or something. That's how I'd be able to do it. All right. So Hello says there's some funky natural language programming languages. Inform 7 comes to mind. So we'll look at this just to see what it's about. Look up a source code sample. It is the only one I'm aware of which has real use, free and commercial. Inform 7 is specifically for making interactive fiction games, like the classic Zork, where you type in verbs like go north to navigate. Okay, cool. So I think, hello, your example here, when I just go to their site, they show a map. So yeah, you could imagine how if you have a language that's talking about like navigating a subway, you know, what sort of stuff would you say? Like go 2 stops on the red line, whatever. Something like that. Is there some kind of sample here? Oh, recipe book. So these things, when you see this term recipe book for programming, that's like the programming equivalent of a phrase book, like this. It's like, what is a common thing that somebody might do in a language like this? Now we could go ahead and look at a sample of what it's like. So, okay, let's look at props. These will probably be pretty easy to understand, like picking up stuff or dropping stuff or something. And then let's look at the stone program. Okay, so this programming language, it tries to be like natural language, so I could even read through some of this. Okay, a food is a kind of thing that is edible. So it looks like it's establishing this term. You have to tell the computer what a food is. The computer doesn't know already because food isn't a key word in the system. So you have to use the syntax to tell about this. A food has a rule called the food effect, carrying out eating a food. So this is like writing a definition of what eating is. If a food is part of the noun, repeat with item running through the things which are part of the noun. If item is a food, follow the food effect of the blah 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 blah. Okay, I get this general idea. Let me just show like one. Okay, I have this whole essay on artificial languages. Let's go to my website. So, and one example I have in this essay I wrote on artificial languages is this this book that this person wrote called a Thing Explainer. And you could say that this is a kind of linguistic game or exercise where somebody, so in this case, this author of some famous comics, tries to write this book where using only, it's like a limited set of numbers or limited set of words, he tries to explain and characterize and you know, explain how stuff works. That's why it's called a Thing Explainer. So for example here, like he calls a microwave a food heating radio box. So food, heat, radio, and box, these are all like these fundamental words that are part of this language. You know, if I were just to make something up, like what would a house be? Maybe something like a living box, because a house would be like a box that you live in, and or maybe that would be a room, and then a house would be like living box, integrated living box collection, or something like that, because multiple people might live in a house, but there will be multiple boxes. So what was the point of that? Oh yeah, so basically here, this programming language is trying to be like natural language, but even still, you see that this isn't how you would talk. It's trying to more closely look like human language, but still, the sort of operations that you're doing in this language would be very different from the sorts of operations you would do just in spoken language. So if you had to sort of explain the whole world from a limited set of words and concepts, so like what I was showing with that thing explainer example, I think Reddit has this board called like explain it like I'm like 5 or something. Yeah, something like this, right? So the idea here is the same. It's kind of like, all right, let's sort of restrict how you express stuff. With a programming language, what happens is you have to express stuff very, very explicitly in order for it to be able to be stored and processed by a machine. Because the computer doesn't intuitively understand all these things. You have to explicitly define all the structures. And of course, you could use like structures or template, whatever you want to call them, that somebody else had written. But in order to input and to run programs, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put stuff in that form. Now, you could look at other systems and how you might have other restrictions in place in which the language you use would sound different from normal. So, for example, this explain like I'm 5. I mean, I could guess that basically what this would mean would be don't use a whole bunch of specialized technical terms. Instead, just use like simple analogies and very common words that everybody would know in order to explain complicated things. That would be the same example to that thing explainer book that I showed you, which would be like, okay, maybe the reason that talking about, let's say, chemistry is really complicated is because people are using, blah, 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 aldehyde connects with the blah, blah, blah subgroup of the blah, 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 idic acid. So if you talk in terms like that, nobody knows what the things that you're talking about are unless they're a very specialized person in that realm. So how do you make things easy to understand? Well, you just give digestible explanations which you correctly could guess or check with the person you're speaking to about whether they follow or not. You don't use words that they don't know, and then through doing that, you could explain like how the pieces fit together, even if they don't know all this technical language for those terms already. And if someone, of course, is interested in continuing on learning, they will eventually come to learn all these specialized terms. But strictly speaking, to give like a high-level overview, it's not needed. So let's just bring that full circle back over to what we were talking about with high-level versus low-level languages. So the goal kind of here with the high-level language is to kind of be like this example that Hello's given of this Inform 7, where you want to be able to just describe to a computer in a way that isn't totally dependent on knowing technical jargon about computers and all that. You want to be able to like explain, well, I won't even say explain, you want to be able to quickly use the formalisms of a computer system using a syntax as natural and easy to remember and type for a human being, basically. So a language like Python, you get words like def, define, defining a variable, making a list, all these things. The way that you do it is quite easy to use and remember. Like even I used to use Python. I haven't used Python for a while, but if I just went through like a handful of the documentation pages today, then I'd probably be caught up to speed pretty fast, and I know where to look stuff up if I needed to. So in this regard, like Python is very successful and useful as a high-level language. All right, we get some more comments here. So Reaper was commenting on this program I'm using here called the NeoVim editor. He says, actually, NeoVim harkens all the way back to the Edline editor from 1969. Not gonna try to contradict that all. It sounds right. Reaper says SQL murder mystery. Yeah, so like a fun idea could be, how would I write like a game, for example, using Microsoft Excel? Could you write a game in Microsoft Excel? I'm sure you could, but you know, if you do that, you're a nerd, and you're really fighting against the intended use of the software. Though, not to say that you couldn't do it. Cool. And then we have Gaffing Gadgets Living Box Collection. Oh yeah, that was what I said about a house. You know, okay, so I was doing manual labor for a couple months. Well, more than a couple months, less than a year, but I did a significant amount of manual labor. I was doing woodwork, and one funny thing was I thought a lot about boxes, because when you do any kind of woodwork, you're going to do a lot of stuff with boxes. It's really funny. So just think about this. Like, you're born, and then maybe they put you in a box. So you're born, and then they put you in a box that's like a crib or, you know, a cradle, something like that. You're put into a box. And then, like, when you go on the road traveling, you travel in a car, which is like a box on wheels. And then, you know, where you live is a house. Oh, let's make this syntax box for infants. Let's make this syntax consistent. A house would be collection of livable boxes. And then, you know, you might use a refrigerator where you put food, maybe a shed or a fridge, specialized storage boxes. And then we'll just skip to when you die. So you die, and then you go to a casket, a coffin, which is it's a box you are buried in. And then maybe if you're rich, you might even have a tomb. Also a box. So it's funny, doing woodwork, I was like thinking about this. I was like, yeah, you know, these box things are really important. Everything has to do that we do in this world, that, you know, you're interfacing with various boxes. And then, like, even if you go on the internet, let's say you go on the internet to try to escape from boxes. Do you escape from boxes? No, you don't. Lo and behold, you run into the CSS box model. So even on the web browser, like, what is this? It's a box defined by boxes and boxes and boxes. You can't run away from the boxes. You're born in a box, you'll die in a box, you'll work in a box, your work will be involved in making boxes. There's boxes everywhere. Alright, Reaper says there's SQL games. Click the links. Okay, I might have to look at these SQL games later. Can't say I have a particular desire to play them, but that's cool to know that there are some nerds that had fun with boxes. Alright, so we had fun talking about boxes. Let's find out what... Okay, why was I even talking about Python to begin with? Oh yeah, because I was looking at this thing, the oral history of Bank Python, which I believe Hello here in this chat sent to me. So my point with that was that Python, what Python did was it allowed people that weren't traditionally in the computer space, for example, in the banking industry, to start to use digital computer solutions for the stuff that they do. Now, if you major, like go to university and you major in computer science, or you study it on your own, like I didn't actually major in computer science. I've taken some computer science classes and I've worked through books, but I didn't actually major in computer science. One issue that a lot of computer science graduates face when they graduate is they're like, all right, cool, I know how to program and do all this stuff. And then they're like, and then what do I do? So a lot of programmers, like, they might have a hobby, like a video, like making video games, modding video games or something. So naturally, their sort of their thing that they go to after they get their computer science degree is they might do something peripherally related to an interest they already had. Maybe if you're already involved, like you got family members that run like a, let's just say they have like an auto shop, they're mechanics. Well, maybe you would use your computer knowledge to, write them a website or help them computerize their system or something like that. Oh, looks like we got a robot. Oh, and Hello notes that, okay, so Reaper had posted some links, but it looks like the spam bot deleted those links, and then instead we're greeted with actual spam. Let me use my moderator powers. I will delete those. Well, actually, why don't I make one of you guys a moderator? That's cool. Hello, you could be a moderator, and Reaper, you could be a moderator. We could all, yeah, that's cool. You guys are moderators. Respect the moderator. Okay, so let's see what we were saying about Python. I remember this topic we were on about bank and new domains. Oh, I was talking about school and education. That's right. Yeah, so I was saying that a lot of people that major in computer science or something, they learned all these tools, abstractions, and ways of organizing systems. But one problem that I think a lot of new graduates of computer science programs will face is that they actually don't really know any other domain. Like, they know how to do a lot of stuff with computers, but if you know how to do a lot of stuff with computers, like, I guess you could talk about computers. That's one thing I did. Like, I talked a bunch about like programming languages and computers and stuff, because learning about computers themselves, I've learned to talk about computers. But beyond that, like if you go and you work in the industry or something, could I write software to control a oil rig, for instance? I think that if I wanted to write software for oil rigs, I would actually have to go and probably work and learn about oil rigs for a while. Otherwise, I wouldn't really be able to do much good with oil rigs. So for me, I got some areas that I'm interested in, such as natural languages that I've mentioned. So I've like worked on projects and stuff related to that. But it was only through actually looking at some domain besides computers proper that I actually had some reasons or motivations to write programs. If you're just like, I need to learn how to code so I could have money, and then you aren't really interested in very many things, that could actually be a lot of a problem for you continuing to be motivated. By you, I mean a hypothetical person that's trying to learn to program, because if they don't already have a job lined up or someone that's asking them to do stuff and paying them stuff, a lot of CS students or just coding students generally, then they're like, all right, we taught you the basics of Python, now go make a sample project. And then they're like, sample project? What does that mean? I don't even know what sort of sample project to make. Like, will someone pay me to make a sample project? And so on and so forth. Anyways, that's to say, on the other hand, then there's people that already know what they want to do, and now they just want computers in order to help them do what they're already doing. And then one example of that is bankers, people who deal with the big bucks. People, they give a bunch of money to the banker, and then the banker could use that money to put in investments and all sorts of stuff. So this article I thought was kind of funny, because from a programming perspective, like all the programs that you see here, you're not going to say like, whoa, that's a cool data structure, that's really complex or something. It looks all extremely basically just using Python like a glorified calculator and a worse interface than just like clicking on links. So here, I guess this one program, Barbara, the Great Key Value Store. This is a popular thing that they use in a lot of financial tech. So here they connect to some database and they don't type out the name exactly. They have this big, complicated string. I think this is base 64 encoding. We could pretend to be hackers here. So if I said this is working, let message equal hello stream. I did A to B message. Oh, maybe I went the other way. B to A. B to A. Yeah, probably this. Then my message gets transformed into a bunch of just letters. So oftentimes with computers, people don't want, you don't want somebody to you to be typing the name of a bank account and something, or that to accidentally get stored in files. So people might do a little thing where you transform some value a little bit so it's not immediately human readable. So that's what sort of thing's going on here. All those crypto bankers trying to be all sneaky. Well, we'll phrase it. They're protecting your security. That's what they're doing. All right, calculate the current value of the bond according to the bank's modelers. So here we see abstraction at work, where you don't know how they do all this calculation of what the value of the bond is worth. You have some people writing and programming all these functions. So current value float equals mygilt.value. So I guess this represents a bond, and then the bond has this value function, and then you just call that, and then what gets outputted will probably just be some number or something that represents the value of this thing based on however this value function calculates. So here, this is very high level language, because we aren't talking about computer memory, hardware, anything of that sort. We're just calling a function called value, and then the Python programming language has these mechanisms, for using assignment and calling a function and all this sort of stuff. Python is basically what is the easiest widespread language that we could use so that people could talk to computers and ask computers to do something. And here is an example of how a banker might be talking to a computer using this package, module, whatever you want to call it, called Barbara. Yeah, so this article was interesting, so you could see how might actual programming get applied to financial technology. And I would say that basically the answer here, what this article shows, is what would generally be considered not extremely sophisticated programming is what the application would be. Now, is that a bad thing? I would say that it is not a bad thing. In fact, this is one of the goals of Python. One of the goals of Python is that non-computer specialists would be able to use that language to be able to model various problems, such that people could not think so much about the programming language itself, but the language would be a powerful tool to quickly get done all the stuff that you want to get done. So I would actually say that all this stuff, it might look kind of janky, or wow, that these people, they don't even seem that smart. How do they get so much money? you might have that sort of reaction, which I think is not an unfounded, invalid reaction to this sort of thing. But on the other hand, I would also say that it speaks well of Python because it shows that Python is able to successfully abstract this particular interface in a way that is so successful that even somebody without like direct Python experience, I imagine they could actually go to this article and at least have a general idea what's going on, particularly if they're already familiar with doing financial stuff, whether it's in Excel or manually on paper or something else. So, yeah, this was an interesting article to look at. I didn't look at it in tons and tons of detail, but whenever you're able to see some sort of example of how do people in industry actually work, and by industry here I'm meaning like big industry where people are spending hours and hours doing maybe like unpaid or super low paid internship or trying to do stuff to climb the ladder, and then it's like, well, at the end of the day, what do these people actually do? And an article like this is like, well, they call functions in Python, which is funny because like, on the computer, you viewers, you could call functions in Python today. I can't say you could be a millionaire today, but you could do what millionaires do. And what millionaires, billionaires, what some of them do is they call functions in Python. And you too could have that winner mindset and also call functions in Python. All right, another link that someone sent me. Oh, by the way, if anybody has any comments or suggestions, of course, always feel free to drop those. No one is interrupting nobody if you do that. But I would like to go through stuff that people did send me because I think that, like, that it would be a more useful thing to do in the stream than to just say like we must charge through the Ellul book no matter what. The value of a stream, a place like this, is that we have a place where you read something on the internet, you have some thoughts about it. How could we actually, in relatively long form, discuss and talk about these various things that we look at? People have complaints about the internet, like, oh, the internet is just this wasteland where people share links and nobody looks at what everyone else is sending. Everyone's doing their own thing. Well, that's why on Alan's stream we do a different thing. We actually read the things that people tell us to read until it's like, all right, that's enough. You didn't have to look at that. And we're done talking about this. I don't want to hear any more. Then it's like, yes, mission accomplished. We looked at the thing you said to look at. Now we don't have to look at it anymore because we're done looking at it. How cool is that? Oh yeah, Hello has... Maybe I'll change the title of the stream. How to call functions in Python as a millionaire. This is an allusion to this famous guy that we showed on this channel, the Tech Lead channel. I don't know if I'd recommend his channel for any kind of advice, but they could be pretty entertaining videos. Okay, so let's look at this Wikipedia article. So, if any of you have been watching the stream, other episodes on the stream, one of the big topics that I've been talking about is technology, society, and then also questions in general of like education, meaning, language, symbolism, that sort of stuff. I like all this stuff, so that's what we talk about here. So people might send me stuff that's related to this topic. So here, got something to look at here called Elite Overproduction. Oh, we got a new guest joining us. Hi, Darklands. Cool. You have a non-generic Google letter in a circle name. What a cool custom guy. All right, Elite Overproduction. So what is this? Elite Overproduction is a concept developed by
Peter Turchin, which describes the condition of a society which is producing too many potential elite members relative to its ability to absorb them into the power structure. This, he hypothesizes, is a cause of social instability, as those left out of power feel aggrieved by their relatively low socioeconomic status. Cool. Oh, I'm going to make like a meta, not Facebook meta, but talking about talking note here. So oftentimes, especially with the social sciences, you will get, let's see, how should I phrase this? I'll call this subtitle, is that a thing? I don't know if this is a California English phrase, but somebody might be like, oh, have you heard of elite overproduction? And then somebody will be like, elite overproduction? What's that? Is that a thing? I think I've heard people say this that weren't just from California, so I get the impression it's not just a California thing. But yeah, I'm in California, and I have used, and I do continue to hear, is that a thing, right? So elite overproduction. Is that a thing? So a lot of the stuff we would talk about, if it would be a thing, it's like, do we have an actual phenomenon where we need a useful term to talk about something that is happening? So for this concept, like elite overproduction, do I know who Peter Turchin is, and do I particularly care who he is? I mean, if I think that this is interesting, I might look into who he is. So it's like a Russian-American evolutionary anthropologist specializing in cultural evolution and cleodynamics, mathematical modeling and statistical analysis of the dynamics of historical society. I mean, I'll just straight up say these sorts of ways in which he's investigating stuff, I think that there's deep levels of cow poop to wade through in those areas. And they're very often misapplications of quantitative methods. So I'm not impressed by his resume here. But that's not to say he hasn't come up with a useful idea. So we don't have to pay attention to him anymore unless it seems relevant to. But let's see if what he talks about is actually a thing. So he talks about a society that's producing too many potential elite members relative to its ability to absorb them into a power structure. And then the image here that they have is a university graduate ceremony. So you have like all these people that are graduating from a prestigious university or something, saying, are there even enough jobs, or there even enough positions that go around for all these people? I would say that clearly, I mean, obviously the answer is no. Let's just talk about K-pop, okay? Let's talk about K-pop, okay? There's all sorts of people that would like to be like a pop star, a K-pop star. They would like to have their K-pop dance group do their whatever. Now, how many slots of elite K-pop people are there? How many famous K-pop people can you actually have, especially when you have K-pop Vocaloids? It's not even like human versus human contact now. You might be competing against Vocaloids. I was hoping that some just funny images would pop up immediately. Oh yeah, okay, you have to compete against, look, the CU Vocaloid has a fall costume and cat ears. And she's aged 17 forever, while you get older. So could you compete with SBS AT&T's Vocaloid Shiyu? Okay, so going back to elite overproduction, you could see how, like, in our media and stuff, there's all this encouragement for people to try to become stuff like, I don't know, YouTube celebrity, professional basketball player, K-pop star, and sort of things. But a lot of these markets, especially the entertainment type stuff, they're sort of winner take all scenarios, or maybe not just winner, but there's elite small groups, and then most of the other people that somehow might make a living off it. They just have little scraps to take, but they don't take much. But you could see how there's an elite overproduction in the sense that the popular music encourages so many people to become interested, devote a lot of their time and energy and all this to this sort of media, of which they are probably realistically only going to be a consumer of that sort of stuff. They're not going to be successful in terms of having a sustainable system of able to make money and share it with their friends or family, have a family, these sorts of things, just by that activity. So here I'm just showing that I'm not uniquely saying, oh, higher education, bad student debt, though huge problems there. I think there's no way out of saying how a lot of these things have been really predatory on people. I think likewise that we could see how the whole idea of pop culture, celebrity culture, all of this too runs on this fantasy of elite overproduction, where you sell this fantasy that you might become this sort of big thing, you might hit it big, but really, like, at the end of the day, you're just buying concert tickets and taking pictures with a custom airplane with BTS boy band, whatever. I don't know what people do these days. All right, cool. We have another friend joining us. Haunted Umami K-pop Idols says, I want to be a brain in a vat. Yeah, if you're a brain in a vat, you could still control your favorite K-pop idol Vocaloids. You could bring life to a digital box and make it seem like it has life, even though it doesn't. Idols. Interesting word choice. Hello says, evolutionary anthropology is weird, and I'm glad you agree. It's applying a base Darwinist principle to where it doesn't belong. Similar to, say, Marxian historiography, where you don't have to be a Marxist or even socialist to follow. It's just an approach to history, but still relies on a thing from another domain as a crutch. Yeah, I would say stuff like evolutionary anthropology and stuff, like, what I've seen of it a lot of the times is you could make a story and then design, like, experiments or, like, things that basically attach numbers on your theory. And it's like, I'm using Python, I'm using data science, so I look smart. And I also, I have a fancy suit, I look like a professor. So what I'm saying is legit. But you just think about the number of assumptions and stuff that would have to make their experiment or whatever actually prove that what they're trying to show is true. To me, it all just blows apart. Like, evolutionary anthropologist people in their hypotheses and stuff, maybe they'll put forth an interesting insight or something. But I think that the nature of trying to, like, study historical stuff is necessarily, you can't repeat an experiment. Like, you cannot experimentally talk about millions of years ago. Experimentally, what you could do is, like, look at how carbon decays or something over a short period, and then try to extrapolate about how that could tell you about the present. Like, there are things that you could do, but just, do we scientifically know about a million years ago in the same way that you could verify how some equations show that, like, this will drop at a certain speed? I think it's epistemologically how we know these things, it's quite different. So they all get thrown under the label of science, but I think that is a cheap shot, and that's not true. If we actually want to look at how we know what we know and what we don't know, I think you will join me in coming to the conclusion that talking about what happened a million years ago is a very hard thing to do. It's like, bro, you don't even know where you left your car keys. Like, you can't even find, I don't know, the leftovers from yesterday. So how could you tell me what happened a million years ago? All right. Hello has another comment. It says the jobs kids aspire to most in America is now to be an influencer. In the past, it would have been things like astronaut, which, to be fair, is even more exclusive. Yeah, well, I think, for example, if you were to say, like, I want to become a YouTuber, like, we're all on YouTube now. I don't have to have the dream to become a YouTuber. You just have to go on YouTube and you have to make videos. And then, lo and behold, you're a YouTuber. Now, if you want to be the top person of the YouTube algorithm, that, in my view, that isn't a choice for you to make. Like, I could decide tomorrow that I want to start my journey into plumbing by, like, I don't know, upgrading my toilet. Like, I could do that. But if I wanted to be the head of a plumbing organization, that's a different story. I think the astronaut thing, yeah, astronaut would even be more exclusive because you can't call yourself an astronaut right away. But on the other hand, I think you could call yourself like a cybersecurity analyst or something. You could call yourself a programmer, I could be like, oh, guys, look, I wrote this program, print hello world. Oh, look, I'm a programmer. I'm programming. Like, you could do that, and it's like, I guess technically you're right, but if you look at what people are actually going for, chances are it's more of a status fame thing as opposed to doing the activity. Like, do you want to be a professional musician? Well, maybe you could find a friend that is like getting married and say, I'll play a song on the piano at your wedding or something. And then if your friend gives you a $20 to do that, congratulations, you're actually a professional musician. Of course, you got to practice and put in a lot of work so that somebody would actually want you to be there. But the idea here is that when it's actually fame or recognition that somebody is going for, that's a very different thing from aspiring to be a certain person who lives a lifestyle where you put in a lot of work consistently to build skills in a particular area. All right, Hello says, you may not like this, but I also think that the hustle culture of striking out on your own, becoming your own boss, that sort of thing, is harder than ever, and that the stats say you'll fail. Yeah, I heard about this. One thing I will add to that, and maybe we could talk more about it this stream or in another stream another day, is I've been learning about, for example, the amount of debt and loans and stuff that are involved in a lot of businesses. So you'll see like a lot of very ambitious looking, aggressive business plans. But the reason that they're able to do that is because they have some method, maybe through like venture capital, angel investors or something, to try some crazy, you might even say like stupid idea, just because some rich person likes it. They were drunk and in an elevator and you sent them their business card and made them agree to something. I don't know exactly how people do this. Feel free to share articles and stuff if you have interesting things related to that. The point being that if you're just like a hard-working person and let's just say you want to strike it out on your own and open a restaurant, well, a person that has to take out a $10,000 loan and work through all this paperwork from a local bank and, basically put in a ton of work, that person is in a very different position from, say, you're already family or friends with a person that owns a building at a major shopping center, and they could hook you up with that space so that you just have to show up, and then you have business that comes. And let's just say you do it at events and stuff. So even if your food isn't even that great or whatever you're trying to do, just because you're at an event, somebody might buy like cans of Coke from you. and because you don't even like do anything to make it, you just have to keep the cans of Coke cold. But because you're well positioned to capitalize on that sort of thing, then you could make a bunch of profit without going through all this work, taking out a loan, like doing all these things that might tie you up in very difficult ways just because of how you're positioned. So I think, yeah, just agreeing with Hello's comment here, that I think hustle culture, it could put a lot of false impressions about how stuff works to people. And I think that there's been a lot of useful, informative expose type things on the internet where they show where a lot of these people that made it with hustle culture actually come from, the sort of resources, help, and stuff that they have available to them, and how they're actually able to do what they do. And then you sort of learn about this, then you could get a more realistic picture of how somebody might actually make it big, so to speak. I think that there's always good general principles of how to be fiscally responsible. For example, you want to live within your means, meaning don't spend all sorts of money on luxuries and things that you can't afford. But also too, you don't want to be like afraid and not willing to put money into other people's enterprise and try stuff. So these would just be generally good ideas in my view. Whereas something like the hustle culture, they'll try to frame the path for wealth in a way that is not, such as the harder you work, the more money you could get. Well, like if you literally lie, cheat, and steal, you could just go around and steal more and more and you'll have more money. But in the real world, if you're not lying, cheating, and stealing, you could only give people and take money with voluntary transactions. That's why commercial stuff is more peaceful than like lying, cheating, and stealing, because you organically grow a business by providing goods and services that people want. So I don't know, maybe I'm just too old school and simplistic thinking about like business fundamentals. But the more I learn about this and all these fancy, I read Investopedia, learn all these fancy terms, like the basic conclusion I come down to at the end of the day is like money, the way money works, it's basically like laid out in the Bible. And it always has been that way, and it'll continue to be that way. And we'll see new forms that stuff takes, but the fundamentals of how stuff works, it has not changed at all. Though, usury at scale, laws forcing people to do stuff, of course we see lots of new expressions of the same things, but the same set of base operations we continue to see. Okay, so we have Reaper here jumping in to defend, I think, the evolutionary stuff. Are you saying because we can't do reproducible experiments about the past that we shouldn't try to rationalize logically about them with as much information as we have? It says hello is wrong. All right, we have some listing. Doctor 2, Teacher 3, Veterinarian 4. I don't know what you're doing with your... Oh, these, I see. The spacing was weird. These are like the things that people want to become. Doctors, teachers, veterinarians, musicians, movie stars, athletes, artists, business owners, writers, and police officers. Hello says, the dumbest VC-funded company I've seen is Juicero. The collapse was spectacular, but unlike, say, WeWork, it wasn't even a product that added value to its customers. It was just nonsense. 120 million in venture capital, including Alphabet, the Google holding company. Yeah, so we could see if you have a very aggressive model for starting a business, such as you have some deep-pocketed friends, such that you have venture capital, then you could afford to, do all sorts of wild stuff with your business and basically be able to continue to be where you are, as long as you don't actually break any laws and you could pay your rent or whatever. Then your business will actually be able to survive and persist and maybe like do a really bad job for a long time before actually giving some kind of solid return with a real working business model for a long time. Whereas if you're just a guy, let's just say you were working like at fast food or something, and then you're trying to ascend and become more wealthy, um, yeah, unless you meet the right people or something, I don't think that you really have a trick to get rich fast, um, except through if you're able to do skillful trading and stuff. I mean, it's possible. You could look at the mechanics how anything is actually possible. For example, like I invested in crypto when I think Bitcoin was around like 4,000, 6,000, something around there. So like now you could see how Bitcoin has 10x since then, got 10x value. So um, let's suppose I had put $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I got a 10x return. So now it's worth 10,000. Now a 10x return, of course, that's very good. Over a couple years, I don't know if you'd call that. I think you'd still call that like really that's really good. If you could obviously consistently do that, then your money would exponentially increase. But still, like a 10x return isn't literally the same thing as, let's pretend you're a fast food person and then YouTube decided that you should be an e-celebrity, and then you went from making $30,000 a year to $3 million a year. You know, that's a much bigger jump. And there is like scaling stuff that has to do with money, where it's stocks and stuff work by percentages. But then, for example, the amount you spend on food, like if you're a multimillionaire, you could still live off, $10 of food a day. Though you might pay the same amount of money for food that like a minimum wage person does. I think it's like Warren Buffett or someone who's famous for like just liking to eat basic McDonald's or something. Okay. Continuing in the comments, Hello says, yeah, Alan, lifestyle business is a better idea. I'll say the idea of never spending got to me hard. To this day, I have a habit of writing down every transaction on a piece of paper, everything. Like I even write down the reward points separately. I plan to import it in a flexible kind of nerdy program called H Ledger. Yeah, I think so. If you want to get really precise about the money, like the personal finance stuff, I mean, like I know pretty wealthy people that still really love to use coupons, and I think that to keep track of this stuff, to do that sort of stuff, I mean, me personally, I wouldn't, if someone does that stuff, I wouldn't be like, oh, you have problems, that's bad. Necessarily, as long as it's contained within, if you think you're doing it too much, then very likely you are doing it too much. But it's not my place to tell somebody that they would be doing something too hard. One thing that really got me sort of motivated to I would say spend more money, in a sense, not just like on luxuries or whatever, but like just investing and stuff in general, trying new stuff, including like making this YouTube channel, doing this stream, being public, is that when you decide to put your time and your money into something, that thing that you're doing is the thing that you actually have the most control over, relative if you were just trading stocks or something. So for example, I trade stocks, right? I could put money into Starbucks because I think that Starbucks is doing a good job. But then if Starbucks starts to do something that I think is totally stupid, even if I'm a shareholder or whatever, like effectively I can't really tell Starbucks to change their course or to to do what I want. However, let's pretend that instead of putting $10,000 into Starbucks, I had a friend that wanted to start a coffee shop. Could even be in a different state. It doesn't even have to be right by me. But if I know and I trust my friend, and I give my friend that $10,000 to use for their business, and I say to my friend, I don't even have to charge you interest. Like, we don't have to do usury. Christian business code. Here's money. If you want to pay it back eventually, that's up to you. But I want your business to succeed. So here's $10,000, right? If I do something like that, then overall, I think that that's actually a better plan. Because if my friend succeeds, then of course I'm happy that I was able to be a part of their success. But also too, I could just like talk to my friend in a way that I can't talk to a huge company like Starbucks. So one, you could say, all right, that sounds great and cool, but I don't know any friends who are doing something like asking for $10,000 to start a coffee shop. So, it doesn't even have to be that much. I have $200 to give to somebody to help work on something. What do I do with it? So that's where I think that a lot of people run into this problem, and then they're kind of like, oh, I'll kind of just go with the system. I mean, that's one of the big reasons I got into stocks and crypto. It's because I was like, well, I don't want my money to do nothing because I had a little bit of money saved. I want to find something to do with it. So I just got into investments because here was something that was accessible for me to invest in. Like, anyone could sign up for Robinhood. I'm working on getting one of those promotion links. So if anybody wants to join Robinhood or something, we could get free stocks or whatever. I'm working on it. Don't have that link yet, but hopefully I get it soon. Anyways, the point being, like, the appeal of something like Robinhood is you could do some investment. You could be like, okay, let's just be honest. Starbucks is better at using $100 to make money than me. And if I don't think Starbucks is totally evil, for example, I've met friends in different cities at Starbucks. Like, Starbucks provides a valuable service of just having a clean, well-organized corporate brand where you could meet somebody in an unfamiliar place. So I'm not like a total Starbucks hater in this regard, because Starbucks, I think, their drinks, it's like, it's just sugar and bad coffee. It's like, well, that might be true, but sugar and bad coffee might be your best option in some areas, like it or hate it. So just be honest with yourself. It's like, if I had like $200 or something, and Starbucks would do a better job using that $200, then they would do a better job than me turning that into something profitable. Then to me, it makes sense to park my money in Starbucks stock for a while, and then hopefully trade and sell it at a higher price, so I take a little profit, than to me to just hold on to that money itself if I already have enough money set aside for emergency or whatever. So I kind of got off the rails just talking about venture capital, but hopefully this stuff was interesting to you all. Okay, let us go down a little bit. Reaper says, you're getting near a conversation about it being so hard to start a successful business that works, but there are hundreds of thousands or millions. There's no logical reason to think that. No, of course I don't think that you can't start a successful business that works. Of course, there's tons of successful businesses that work, and then people do it successfully. But no, I'm talking about like when people have these ideas about basically success in kind of winner-take-all scenarios, and then also launching a business in particular places. So, for example, if there's like a high-end shopping mall, it's probably harder to get started in a high-end shopping mall selling clothes. But if you could start like a little store, maybe you sell like some used clothes and you also have some custom-made boutique items or something like that, and you also have an online Etsy store or something. Like, to me, then that sort of business, that just sounds like a totally normal thing tons of people do. And it doesn't sound like it fail or anything.
Yeah. Okay, so Reaper says unattainable, yes, challenging, but not like winning the lottery. Yeah, and I think, there is something, even these hustle culture bros, if you do put forth effort, like you make phone calls, you try to ask for things, even if people say no, you put in an application, you put in 10 applications, they all get rejected, and you put in 10 more, and then finally someone gives you a chance. Like, I think all these ideas, just being persistent and trying stuff, I think there's a ton to learn from all of these. So one should not just despair and be like, oh, it's all a scam, because that's no good. But I think, too, if we also know ourselves what sort of opportunities and things that we're looking for, and also, too, like, we could identify plans and stuff that actually work and help friends and family and people we know that are trying things that we think is a good idea. I think that a lot of the times, ultimately, that will be the way forward in order to, like, how do we spend our money to create a better world? I think one of the ways is to invest in the people that you want to succeed. So, like, right now, I do, like, a lot of stocks and crypto and stuff like that. But ultimately, crypts and stocks and crypto and stuff, I'm just in it because I want to make money off of it. Like, if there was a coffee shop besides Starbucks to actually buy coffee at nearby, and I like the people there, they did a good job, then I should go to that coffee shop and spend, extra money, even if I have to, at the beginning, investing in that place's success if I want to see them succeed. All right. So Hello mentions this fellow producer Michael. I'll have to look at this guy. I haven't looked at his channel. We won't talk about him on this stream because I haven't seen him. But that sounds interesting. Hello says, question for Alan. If you won the lottery or became super rich, what would your life look like? Would you live like producer Michael? What's your vision of that life? So, as I said, I haven't seen this producer Michael fellow. Realistically, if I came across a ton of money, I would not immediately do anything to make my life look different. Like, my life is such that it's like this. Like, right now, I'm a single guy. So, and I don't really need all that much stuff myself. So, the way that I would use a bunch of money, as first I would have to be super careful and wise and find somebody who would want to start a family with me, basically, right? Like, marry somebody and start a family. And then once you're doing that, you're starting the family. So contingent on where that person lives and stuff, where their parents, the family, whatever, wherever they live, whatever you want to be near, then you could start putting down the money and stuff on land and real estate and that sort of thing. But as for me, like, if I'm just me, a single guy, and I have, like, research interests and I'm learning how to do all sorts of different types of work, and I do this stream and stuff, I mean, there's no real need for me to actually hold on a lot of money myself. There's no point. So if I did come across a bunch of money, I'd find out how to invest it in other people. But I myself, I don't really need much. Reaper says, the hustle culture bros is a weirdo subculture. Kind of tons of self-help. People wanting to make money by talking about making money. Yes, that's right. And Yoggin. Hello, Yoggin. Hello. Good to see you join here. All right, let's just get into Reaper offered a good transition point here. The title of this stream is Internet Subcultures, Industrial Programming, and More. So we talked a bit about industrial programming. Let's talk a little bit about internet subcultures, and we will use hustle culture as a transition point here. So before the internet, I think there was stuff like hustle culture, right? Like how to get rich. Like a classic book is Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. So anybody who's kind of been around hustle culture stuff and looked at reading lists, I would say it's pretty likely that you saw this book. So Think and Grow Rich, written by Napoleon Hill in 1937.
and promoted as a personal development and self was written in 1937 and promoted as a personal development and self-improvement book. He claimed to be inspired by a suggestion from business magnate and later philanthropist Andrew Carnegie. Okay, so 1937, before internet, you could say that this book is a kind of predecessor, a forerunner of hustle culture in general. I think most people would probably agree when I say that. So then the question to ask here is, how did hustle culture as a particular internet phenomenon arise? And furthermore, how do internet subcultures in general rise? So I'm going to switch over to an article here that was sent to me. I believe Reaper sent this to me. Reaper knows a lot about retro computer stuff. So he sent me the site, and it has to do with internet subcultures, as it says. Now, I'll just warn you all, if you do read the site, there's some kind of pervy sexual stuff on here, I think, as one might expect if you're reading stuff by people who rant on the internet about internet subcultures. Talking about that topic, you will inevitably run into that sort of thing. So, trigger warning for YouTube. Okay, so let's just read this blurb. If you crack open some of the mustier books about the internet, you know the ones I'm talking about, the ones which invoke Roland Barthes. Who is Roland Gérard Barthes? A French literary theorist, essayist, philosopher, critic, and semiotician. So semiotics is studying like symbols and meanings. Barthes' idea explored a diverse range of fields, and he influenced the development of many schools of theory, including structuralism, semiotics, social theory, design, anthropology, and post-structuralism. So this guy, it seems he's of the same general generation as people like Jacques Ellul of the Technological Society, who we're talking about. So it seems these Frenchy people are the ones who have been talking about a lot of this cultural symbolism stuff that goes into the intellectual foundations of the internet, so to speak. Now, comment by Hello and then by Reaper. Hello says, will you be in California, do you reckon, and still in the city or in a more remote place? Yeah, I'm in California. I'm in Sacramento. I'm in the capital. Reaper says, I think internet hustle culture kind of got big from the original blogging community, and especially the 4-hour workweek bro, and also the marketing principle in that blogging community. Gives an example of Vaynerchuk, but suggests Vaynerchuk is legit. Yeah, I think just as a general point here, let's just say, something like take any internet subculture like hustle culture. Is it because someone's associated with hustle culture? Does that mean that they don't ever say anything legit? It's like, no, they actually might be saying like useful things 70% of the time. If somebody is a furry, does that mean that they never say anything useful? I don't think that's the case. You might not want to identify with them or follow their lifestyle, but they still might have a lot of useful knowledge to share about all sorts of stuff. All right, let's return here to this Melancholy of Subculture Society, and let's look at who is this? Who is the guy who made this? So, govern.net. What's the guy's name? What's your name, dude? This section covers the most important things to know about me. What's your name, dude? I'm looking for your name. You gave me your email, your Bitcoin, yourmorals.org. how you collaborate, but dude, what's your name? Come on. I guess I just have to call this guy by his URL. So this guy's site, Gwern, I don't know how he says it, .net. Anyways, he's a freelance American writer and researcher, and I don't know his name. So I'm going to assume Gwern, however he says it, that's who he is. But yeah, apparently this guy's a professional writer, and he wrote this very long page about subcultures, so we'll go through it a little bit. Okay, you may remember this as the... Oh, okay, let's just finish this and discuss the sexual transmission of MUDs. So I think that's old video games, yeah. Multi-user dungeon with later variants, multi-user dimension and multi-user domain. One of the few and still relevant criticism is the concern that the internet, by uniting small groups, will divide larger ones. Okay, so what is this? The site evokes, these French theorists, and is talking about how on the internet you have all sorts of little groups that arise. But maybe once you get all these little groups, then society as a whole will become more divided and fragmented. Okay, Reaper has another note. He says, I also think hustle culture got big along with sharing economy companies, partly because people want to make believe what they have to do to make ends meet is a smart path leading to something. Jorgen says, the internet is just not fulfilling to me. Yeah, I think, I'll build up Jorgen's point here. I think, for me, looking at and being on the internet a lot, my basic conclusion is you have to learn, the internet is there whether you like it or not, but we have to learn how to use the internet in order to connect with people really in real life. So how do you tame the internet and use it and extract maximum? How do we milk the internet? We want to extract maximum value from it, make it useful in all the capacities we can. Not be addicted to it, not be controlled by it, but make it as useful to us as possible. And then when we do have friends and stuff that are totally hooked in, how do we drag them out with us and have them join us in a nicer, fulfilling life, which will be mostly offline? Let's see. Hello says, there's an idea for a future stream. Rootlessness, traveling the globe, and if that really makes us wiser in a more global, unified world. All right, let's add that to the future topics. I think the term you're looking for is the digital nomad. Rootlessness and global travel. That's a good idea. Okay, Jorgen says, I need to see people repeatedly or I start to feel like people don't like me. I think it could also happen that you see people repeatedly and they still don't like you. I think that could happen as well. But I don't think our purpose. I don't think our purpose is for everybody to like us, right? It's important that we face people and we do things. And I'll bring this right back to internet subcultures, which is, I think one reason a lot of people find internet subcultures comfortable is because they're looking for a place where everybody will like them and A, like them, and B, be like them. They want to find, people make fun of this slang, the safe space. So you can go on urbandictionary.com. Let's look at a safe space. Right, so why would somebody find an internet subculture? My hypothesis here is one reason people want that sort of thing is because they want everybody to like them and they want to be near people that are like them. So safe space, what does Urban Dictionary say? An imaginary place where overly sensitive twats retreat to, where they are assaulted with ideas that contradict the narrative that was ingrained into their feeble minds. All right, a lot of normative claims there. We got these value judgments, but that's okay. We're just doing research. We're not insulting people who use the term safe space. We're just learning what is meant by it. All right, so we have a a specific manifestation of a physical space, safe space here. So not just on the internet, right? If you want to be fulfilled by one of these things, people might even go offline. What do we have here? A special room on campus where university-educated young adults go and behave like children whenever they suffer a severe case of Trumpomiltration. All right, so it looks like a Trumpkin wrote this. I'm not going to get into discussion about Orange Man here, but we could all agree that Orange Man definitely has been a very decisive figure and a catalyst for a lot of social changes. I think we could all agree on that. Okay, we'll have one more definition here. A place where individuals of an oppressed group can go to find community with other individuals of the same group without feeling the threat of harassment or violence. People who are against the idea of safe spaces often misconstrue them as a place to escape reality, when actually there's places people go to understand the collective reality of oppression and find support. A safe space is not ignorant of hard realities. It's just a place where people can go exist without fear of harassment based on parts of their identity. Okay, so I actually like this definition, and we could use this as a transition point back to looking at internet subcultures, and I'll also actually tie this into the metaverse. So one of the big selling points that Zuckerberg offered in the metaverse was, in the metaverse, you could teleport and instantly get away from people, block, mute people, and sort of establish your own group or place where you could basically control what you see and hear. So you have, like, every user has the ability to make a safe space. Oh, let's just say Hello says, for rootlessness, I was thinking of Simone Weil's formulation. In my loneliest times, I don't care about just leaving where I was. I could live anywhere. There was nothing tying me down as I was isolated. And he also said, you didn't answer my question. In the dream life, would you still be in California or somewhere else? Maybe on a personal island like Richard Branson. Okay, yeah, I'll answer the dream life question. Really, I would say that I actually personally, I really don't have that much opinion. Like, California's got a lot of nice things, If you like to go to the ocean, you like to go to the mountains, you like to go into the forest. California has all sorts of stuff in terms of natural things. I'm not an anti-city person. That might be one place where I differ from, like, E-celeb Luke Smith. Luke Smith taking inspiration from some controversial figures, embraced a meme, and goes and lives out on the rural farmland and stuff. I don't necessarily think that you should do that, though. I mean, I would say, like I said, right now I'm just a single guy, so depending what sort of family I get involved with, getting married and stuff eventually, then that would be a big determiner and sort of where I decide to put down more money and stuff like that. But until then, I'm just a rootless, shifty internet presence. I try to find my way and do some good wherever I am. But in terms of putting down stuff and if I got really rich or whatever, it wouldn't, there's not much I desire myself. It would have to be related to what somebody else would want. Okay, back to right. So safe spaces, and then let's get back to this surfing alone passage. Okay, so yeah, you may remember this as the bowling alone thesis. So there's this book, Bowling Alone, the collapse and revival of the American community. So Robert D. Putnam, 2000. Let's see. Putnam surveys the decline of social capital in the United States since 1950. He has described the reduction in all forms of in-person social intercourse upon which Americans used to found, educate, and enrich the fabric of their social lives. He argues that this undermines the active civil engagement what a strong democracy requires from its citizens. Okay, I mean, we could look at this just descriptively, which is to say, for those of you who are joining from America, yeah, there's a lot of places in America where aided, or I wouldn't even say aided, accelerated, catalyzed by the internet, people certainly are becoming much more isolated, but it's not forced upon them. They're choosing to surf alone. They're choosing to retreat to their safe spaces. So I haven't read this Bowling Alone book. It probably talks about these things. The basic idea is electronic entertainment devices grows in sophistication and inexpensiveness as the years pass, until by the 1980s and 1990s, they have spread across the globe and have devoured multiple generations of children. These devices are more pernicious than traditional geeky fares, inasmuch as they are often best pursued solo. Spending months mastering Super Mario Brothers all alone is a bad way to grow up normal. Okay, this is interesting here. I think that, yeah, you could look at how a lot of activities, they inherently include other people. So, for example, let's just say you're obsessed with sailing boats. So if you're interested in sailing boats, you're going to have to deal with other people at the dock, probably learning how to do a boat. You probably have to learn from somebody else. There's a lot of nature of a lot of activities that involve working with other people, fundamental to the activity. Maybe some of you have been in like band and orchestra in school. Let's contrast that with even like playing a solo instrument like piano, or you could see in the background I got a classical guitar. Maybe a sad story here, right? But maybe one of the reasons that I started to play classical guitar and learn classical guitar was like I didn't really have any friends that were interested in playing music with me, but I wanted to learn about music. So, I would sit there and I would pull out my classical guitar studies and I would learn how to play guitar and study the theory and how to read the music, and I would do all this and I would enjoy it quite a bit. But all in all, I mean, it's been a pretty solo endeavor, all things considered. And maybe a lot of people that play instruments like piano or other solo instruments, they have a similar tale to study, similar tale to tell about how they studied their instrument. Whereas on the other hand, there's only so much you could do playing a tuba by yourself, like you could, I guess, but at the end of the day, you probably wouldn't be playing a tuba unless you're going to choose to play with other people, and there would be an inherent social thing about it. So I think that we see that inherent in a lot of the digital entertainments, pastimes, hobbies, whatever you want to call them. A lot of them, they have this inherent character which allows them to be pursued in a solo way. So on one hand, it gives people freedom in that, they don't need to get people together to do it. They could just pursue these activities on their own. But then on the other hand, it will make a lot of people like lone surfers, which, a lot of people will find that quite lonely. Let's just read Hello's last messages and say good night to him, because he is in a different time zone. Seems he's going to sleep. He says, I read parts of it and it's a haunting essay. I'm not exactly sure. I'll have to look up which thing he's referring to here, but continuing. It also doesn't give answers. Anecdotally and backed by science, I don't enjoy a lot of real-life social interactions, but I'm usually fulfilled the next day. So I'll think it was boring maybe when I leave, but then the next day I'll feel so much better and it will be more memorable. It's hard to beat the instant dopamine of the net, though. I think finding balance will be hard, but also we're already there. In-person interaction won't be cut down any more than it is now, even with the metaverse. All right, so those are closing thoughts, and Hello adds one more thing. It doesn't have to give answers. There are no answers to such societal problems, and bowling alone didn't have them either. Yeah, so I think here on this stream, and we can talk. Maybe we'll even read Bowling Alone. A lot of times when we're analyzing, we're studying, we're seeing how stuff works. To study and analyze how stuff works, you don't need to say like, oh yeah, and here I have the perfect solution. You could study something and say like, with all this stuff, there's just inherent problems in it. The nature of our existence here is on this earth we toil. Once again, getting a bit biblical here. But we expect that insofar as we're on this earth, we are living our lives. Are you going to come to a perfect solution, ideology, whatever? Personally, I believe the answer is no. So whatever time and place you're in, you got to pay attention, talk with the people that you need to talk with, study the issues at hand. But I don't expect you to. I don't expect us to solve things once and for all. I don't think it works that way. Cool. All right. Good night to Hello. I'll tell you what we'll do here on this stream. I'll read through a paragraph or a section 2 more here. Then we'll just read like one paragraph of Jacques Ellul just to say that we did, and then we'll call it a night. And of course, you'll feel free to leave comments and stuff. And if we get into an interesting topic, we might go longer. Otherwise, I have laid out the plan for just right now. So let's continue. All right, and then there were none. So following the surfing alone section, he just talked about how you could play Super Mario Brothers and master it all by yourself, and then you might become a weirdo if you did that. Let's see what he has to say next. The 4 or 5 person Dungeons & Dragons party with a dungeon master gives way to the classic arcade with its heated duels and one-upmanship. The arcade gives way to the flickering console in the bedroom with one playing Final Fantasy VII alone. The increased graphical realism, the more ergonomic controls. Oh, that's interesting. The introduction of genuinely challenging AI techniques, trend after trend, was rendering human opponent unnecessary, and gamer after gamer was now playing alone. I'm just going to make a note here about this ergonomic controllers thing. I noticed in the recent years, even on like Instagram and Facebook, I'll find all these advertisements for like custom keyboards and stuff. Previously, this was just the realm of nerds. Like, who talked about like, oh, this is my favorite keyboard. Look, I have a cool Logitech mouse. It has the scroll wheel. You could spin infinitely. Now, that wouldn't be like a normal person thing to know about until gaming and stuff really brings it in. Oh, we have a new guest joining, TY2048. Cheesed to have you here as well. Thanks for joining. Right, so the topic now that we're looking at is internet subcultures, and we have this essay here that talks about how everybody has become a loner bug man on the internet. And I'm highlighting this word here, ergonomic controllers, where ergonomic means something like, it's comfortable in your hands. It's nice to use, as opposed to like, a big clunky terminal where you have to like reach over here and do all that. You could just like sit there in your pod. Very comfortable. You probably have air conditioning. A very, very comfortable setup. But that actually contributes more to people finding ways to isolate themselves. Like, let's just look at the example of this guy himself. He's talking about 4 to 5 people in a Dungeons and Dragons party. I mean, I don't think I have to give stereotypes about like nerds and Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. Well, it'll be more fun. Let's just like look up how these things are portrayed. They probably sanitized it, made it look like. No, I want to see a bunch of nerds around a table. Let's say table. Tabletop. Okay, yeah. So, you could imagine, and of course, no, nothing. I don't know these people. We're just looking at impressions. We're just sharing what we see. No, not trying to cast shade on them. But this is to say that there's something messier when you have people meeting in real life, like these people here. So, they're in these folding chairs. So as opposed to having let's look at an example of an ergonomic gaming chair. As opposed to an ergonomic gaming chair, wow, very comfortable. Let's pull up this more classic example, the Wall-E chair. Okay, so you could be like super comfy, like in the Wall-E in the Wall-E movie. But when you get together with a bunch of nerds in a tight space, you might have to use like flimsier folding chairs. Maybe the guy next to you smells bad. Maybe your friend sucks at math, so you have to wait on them because they're kind of slow. Yeah, Yoggin says, look at the guy's mutton chops. Out of control. Okay, Yoggin says he'll take the role of casting some shade. Yeah, so let's go back to this essay we were looking at. So ergonomic, I think, represents just comfort, being able to do the same thing for a long time, staying in the same position, like the Wall-E chairs. But the 4 to 5 person Dungeons and Dragons experience is quite different. It'll involve a lot of people maybe rubbing shoulders, being uncomfortable with one another. So these other things mentioned, the introduction of genuinely challenging AI techniques. So, I don't know, have any of you played a game with somebody who's just very bad at the game? So it could be like a physical game. Like, let's say you're playing one-on-one basketball. Like, some guy is all bragging about how he's all good. And then you play him and you're like, oh, dude, this guy actually really sucks. I actually feel kind of bad. I don't want to, like, totally own him. Like, totally humiliate him, because that's not good sportsmanship. But this person's really bad. Or like a board game, chess or whatever. So stuff like that, I think that when you're playing with other people and you encounter these things just as people, as humans, right, then we have to go out of our way to be accommodating to people. You're offering a kind of service, you're kind of hosting. If you know how to play a game way better than someone like chess or something, you're kind of in the sensei chair, the teacher or something, where you want to give them a good game. You don't want to just totally destroy them. You want it to be fun, even if you wouldn't choose that person as an opponent. Like I remember, like as a little kid, I remember I would play chess with my grandfather, and one of the things that my grandfather would do when I was like a really little kid is he might give me a couple of pieces for free. So he might say like, all right, I'll play, but then I won't play with my knight and my bishop. Or like, you choose 2 pieces and I won't play with those. And then, this was a way where I'm just like a little kid messing around. I just know the rules, but I don't know what I'm doing. And then like my grandfather had played some more chess. So he gives himself a handicap while he plays this game. And then it could still be a fun game for both of us to play, It'd be challenging and interesting for him to play because, how do I win given this limitation? And then as a little, hyperactive kid, then even just sitting still is hard enough. So it might be already already engaging and challenging enough there. But what does AI do? So when you introduce the AI into a game, what does that mean? Well, AI doesn't have feelings, Did you know AI doesn't have feelings? So you could just totally go hard. You could totally destroy an AI. You could lie, cheat, scam. Well, you couldn't. You're not really lying because it's not another person. Like you could do really annoying, oppressive strategies on the AI that would be considered totally bad sportsmanship to do on another person. Like a lot of games, I know this from StarCraft. There's this thing called cheesing. Look up the term. Let's look at this site. What is cheesing in gaming? What does cheesing in gaming mean? Cheesing describes a situation in which a player uses powerful strategies that are far too easy to use and almost impossible for your opponents, be they living or AI, to beat. These strategies often involve little or no skill, and they can be pretty irritating when you encounter them. So, like, if you're playing a game with people and you want to have a good, fun game, like, don't do this cheesing stuff. But if people are playing against AIs or just anonymous strangers on the internet, people will totally use and exploit, like, all these cheesing things as long as they can, because they're kind of doing a win at all costs sort of thing against the AI. Alright, let's continue this text. Perhaps, the critic says, the rise of the internet has ameliorated that distressing trend. So ameliorated, like making it better. The trends favored no connectivity at first, but then there was finally enough surplus computing power and bandwidth for massive connectivity to become the order of the day. It is much more satisfactory and social to play MMORPGs, massive multiplayer online role-playing games, basically what Zuck wants the metaverse to have, but you have a VR headset or whatever, so it's even more immersive. So these are more immersive than single-player RPGs. Much more satisfactory to kill human players in Halo than alien AIs. The machines finally connect humans to humans, not human to machine. We're forced to learn some basic social skills to maintain some connections. We're no longer retreating into our little cocoons, interacting with no humans. Oh, okay, this skilled professional writer, he has me intrigued. I'm going to read the next section because he got me hyped. Oh, MMORPGs, did they solve all the problems? Welcome to the NHK. But, the critic continues, things still are not well. We are still alienated from one another. The rise of the connected machine still facilitates withdrawal and isolation. It presents the specter of the hikikimori, Japanese word, the person who ceases to exist in the physical realm as much as possible. It is a Japanese term, of course. They are 5 years further in our future than we are. Or perhaps one should say were, Gibson writes back in 2001, and also in his Shiny Bowls of Mud short essay. Oh, I want to pause for a minute just to talk about this. So, Japanese stuff is described as 5 years further in our future. One might call this, tinfoil hat conspiracy talk, to say, oh yeah, ideas that eventually they'll roll out in the West, they have prototyped in Asia. But like in my own life, I'll just name one thing and give no further comment about this one particular issue because we're on YouTube. At least 5 years ago, before the year 2021, visiting East Asia, you could see people wearing masks everywhere. So in East Asia, there was already an accepted cultural norm of people just wearing a face mask, going around cities and stuff. 5 years before 2021 or 2020. So Asia was ahead of the time in that regard. With that being said, let's return to the quote here. So it says, the Japanese seem to the rest of us to live several measurable clicks down the timeline. The Japanese are the ultimate early adopters, and the sort of fiction I write behooves me to pay serious heed to that. If you believe as I do that all cultural change is essentially technologically driven, so pay attention to that line. This guy believes all cultural change is essentially technologically driven. You pay attention to the Japanese. They've been doing it for more than a century now, and they really do have a head start on the rest of us. If only in terms of what we used to call, quote, future shock, unquote, but which is now simply the one constant in all our lives. So this guy is saying cultural change is tech driven, and this thing called future chalk is the thing that characterizes our lives, our culture, whatever you want to call it. Okay, Gibson also discussed the mobile girl and text messaging. The culture began really showing up in America around 2005. Sidekicks, Twitter, etc. I think Sidekicks is some kind of, yeah, it's like a phone. Alright. You can do anything with this cell phone. Order food, do your job, read and write novels, maintain a lively social life, engage in social status envy. She has a smaller phone and a larger collection of collectibles on her cell phone strap. Which is just another way of saying you can do anything without seeing people just by writing digital messages. And this in a country with one of the most undigitizable writing systems in existence. So this is referring to Japanese. People are interested on another stream. We could talk more about what Japanese writing is like and how it works. Languages are not created equal. All right. The hikikomori withdraws from all personal contact. The hikikomori does not hang out at the local pub, swilling down the brewskis as everyone cheers on the home team. The hikikomori is not gossiping at the Rotary Club, nor with the lions or murmurs of veterans or knights. Oh, so you're being a weeb instead of joining fraternal organizations. Just as a side note, there are other things that you could do to meet people besides the aforementioned options. Alright, hikikomoris do none of that. They aren't working, they aren't hanging out with friends. And then we have a quote: the paradoxical solitude and omnipotence of the otaku. The new century's ultimate enthusiast, the glory and terror inherent of the absolute narrowing of personal bandwidth. Alright, so this guy, a Westerner, that's talking about all this Japanese obsession culture. So what are they doing with their 16 waking hours a day? Alright. That'll do it for reading this thing for today. Catch us on our next stream. We'll continue reading the Melancholy of Subculture, starting with the section called Opting Out. I will add this stuff to the description notes. Tune in again to hear more in our next installment. Now let's just read one paragraph from the Technological Society, just to say we did, and then I will close up this stream. So thank you all, those who are still with us. I don't even know if anybody is still here, but we had a lot of activity in the chat, so nice to see you all and see some new faces as well as familiar faces joining us again. So we left off in this Jacques Ellul book, him talking about how technology and magic, they're kind of one and the same, because magic, you could think of it as a fixed set of processes in order to bring about some change in the world, often through like calling upon some other power outside of you. At least that's how I understand him to be saying it and how I defined it. So he's talking more about magic. So let's see what he has to say. The realm of magical practice is limited, and there is little or no diffusion. Propagation begins with, quote, spiritualists, end quote, religions, which are not bound to special magical rites. There is then no possibility of choice between different rival magical techniques. Yet expansion and choice are decisive factors in technological process. There is no real progress in the realm of magic. Here lies its fundamental difference. There is no progress in space, no progress in time. Indeed, the tendency of magic is to regress. And because magical technique is tied to one ethnic group, to one given form of civilization, it disappears completely when that group or civilization disappears. Okay, so here we have some kind of ethnographic, cultural remarks about magic, saying how magic is associated with one group. I think probably what's going to go on here is to be talking about how technology pushes groups and civilizations to keep on evolving, and as they evolve, then the magic will also evolve. That's where I think that he's probably going to be going with this. In the same way, and this is related to the subculture reading that we're looking at, which is to say these these subcultures, they kind of pop up. They're driven by like technologies like Super Mario Brothers or Final Fantasy or whatever, and then the magic associated with these things is associated with a particular technology in a time and a place. So I think that where this book will probably be going, we'll see if I'm right or wrong, is that as the technology advances and things change, then also too, then you kind of move past these ethnic groups and stuff, because now instead of like ethnic groups and things like that, you'll have other vehicles like subcultures built around particular technologies and stuff, which will determine the current winning forms or different teams of Magic. And just relating this once again to the subculture stuff, I think you could see that a little bit on the internet today, where we have these different subcultures on the internet that are kind of, people will talk about like let's look at the, if I just search internet culture war, what do you think I'll find? Okay, so Atlantic, we got some Fed posting. Yeah, well, I'll just read this one thing. A culture war is a cultural conflict between social groups in the struggle for dominance of their values, beliefs, and practices. It commonly refers to topics on which there is general societal disagreement and polarization of societal values. Yes, so I think eventually we're gonna get into a cultural war discussion. We could talk about these things, but I think this is a good stopping point where we have tied in Jacques Ellul's The Technological Society, and then also started to read this interesting essay, The Melancholy of Subculture Society, which is explaining to us how the Japanese fit into all of this, and also it seems to be a pretty interesting cultural analysis of the mechanics of how technology has sliced and diced society. All right, I thank everybody who's popped in here to join. It's been a good stream. Thanks for your comments and stuff. As always, leave comments if there's anything that you didn't mention already on the stream. Otherwise, the stuff I got here in this in the show notes, I'll work from this, and also I'll plan on updating the description after all my streams to reflect what we actually have been talking about. So thanks everyone for joining, and I hope to see you all next time. Thank you.